Hey guys, it is Farmer Stephanie here with the inaugural Ask Farmer Stephanie video. So you guys submitted questions via my online Google form about your gardening experience, questions, problems, things you're seeing, stuff like that. And I am going to answer them using my experience and knowledge and things I've learned over the years to try and help you guys. I love what I do. I just kind of naturally get a lot of gardening questions from people when I run into them at markets or through the schools where I do mentorship, stuff like that, family, friends, stuff like that. And I love answering the questions. And I thought I kind of did this for multiple reasons. One, I thought people are asking questions that lots of people probably have the same question. So I thought this way I can answer a question and maybe reach more people at the same time, help out more people. And then also I do get busy, and so there are just times where I'm getting text messages and I'm seeing Facebook comments, or I'm getting messages through Facebook Messenger, and I think I do a pretty good job of answering everybody, but sometimes things slip, or it just takes a little bit of time to sit there and type out a message. I don't love typing messages. I like talking more. So here we go. I have 4 questions for our first week today, which is exciting. And in no particular order, my first question came from Andy, and he said, is there any specific type of fertilizer you would recommend for peppers? Our peppers seem stunted compared to everything else in the garden. Thanks for your question, Andy. I will say a few things about peppers. I don't have any specific oh, you have to use this on your peppers, but I will say that peppers are slower growing than a lot of other garden crops, and they love the heat, which up till this week, so today is Saturday, June 22nd, and this week leading up to today has been really hot, and we had a few days in the 90s, but prior to that we didn't have a lot of heat. We had some nice days, but nothing real hot. So I would be curious, Andy, if your tomato or your peppers showed a little more growth this week with that heat. I would suspect maybe they did. And then other than that, not specific to peppers, but just all crops at this time of the year when they're focusing on that plant growth and that root establishment, they need a lot of nitrogen. So you're going to look for a fertilizer that is higher in nitrogen if you want to help boost them. So if you're looking for an organic option, I have used blood meal. I think you can also use bone meal. I think it's pretty high in nitrogen, and those both you can buy them in baggies in the garden aisle of wherever you like to shop, Farm and Fleet or Menardos or Home Depot or Walmart probably, or you could stop at a local, if you're in Kenosha, we have Suburban Garden on 30th Avenue. He'd be a great local spot to get some garden amendments. Right, my second question is, how do I keep the bunnies out of my garden? They've already gotten the kale, kohlrabi, and pepper plants down to nubs, and that came from Michelle. I get questions a lot about bunnies and squirrels, and it's kind of been tough for me because I don't deal with those types of pests, living out kind of in a rural area where I'm using multiple acres and doing long row format, and I'm just not near, I guess, habitat for rabbits and squirrels. I get mice once in a while because they'll go anywhere. But yeah, so it's tough because I don't have a lot of personal experience with trying to keep these things out of gardens, but I would definitely just say a really well thought out fence is got to be the best, most foolproof way to do it. So bunnies will dig, so you want something that either is going to kind of lay flat or even dig down a little bit into your ground so that they can't quite readily get under it. They'll probably have a little jump, so you need some amount of height. I don't think you need a ton of height for bunnies, maybe 12 to 18 inches. And then just small, a chicken wire size hole or a really small square pattern fencing. I know a friend, Nicole, was just kind of grieving recently because she was repairing her garden fence, and the bunnies were very opportunistic. She had just a hole where she was patching, and within a night they got themselves in there and got at her stuff. So they're very smart. They're going to find a way through. So if you're going to commit to a fence, you have to fully commit, because if you're going to do it halfway or just kind of, oh, this should be good enough, no, they want what's in there. Especially they've already been in there once this year. They know that's where there's easy pickings, so they're going to be back. I'll address marigolds. I've heard both. You hear some people say, oh yeah, swear by making a border of marigolds, keep the rabbits out. But then you'll hear other people say they ate the marigolds and then they went right through the other crops. So I don't know. I think it's a great theory that there's plants that are going to turf bunnies, but probably if they want to eat, they're going to eat. So good luck with that, Michelle. The other thing I would say, I guess, if I was going to be in, and I think Michelle's gardens are raised beds, even if they were ground plots, I think what I would do if I was in kind of that suburban setting, small backyard setting, I would maybe build like, and this too would be like a commitment, but I think this could be a little like permanent, and it could help like with birds. I've given this idea to people who are trying to keep birds like out of their strawberries, but to build like a, almost like a structure. I'm sitting in front of a table that I built here with 4 legs and a top, right? And so that's what I'm picturing. Build something that's gonna sit up and wrap that in chicken wire, something that you can easily like pick up and move or flip, maybe make small sections so you could just pick, hey, this one's over my beans, and pick that up when it's time to like maintain your beans or harvest your beans. Obviously for some crops it would need to be taller, but for your shorter crops like beans, it doesn't have to be very tall, relatively speaking. Your lettuces, things like that. So I would maybe do something like that. Again, if this was like, hey, I want to garden every single year and these bunnies are just relentless, I would maybe take the time to create a structure like that. Okay, our next question today came from Trisha, and Trisha says, early rain and possibly hail, although not entirely sure on the hail, but some of my tomato plants have black leaves. When I pull off the affected leaves, it is still green and feels rooted into the ground. Think they'll recover, question mark. One on the right is what I'm questioning. So she sent me a picture, which I did review. She said the one on the right is what I'm questioning. The left one I planted more recently because I thought they were all going to die. I'm squinting because the sun just came out. So Trisha sent a great picture of her garden there where I could see exactly what she was talking about, 2 different tomato plants. Definitely, Trisha, I'll acknowledge the plant on the right definitely looked not quite as like healthy and vibrant as the newer plant on the left. I think it's a great sign that they're still rooted in and that it doesn't sound like all the leaves are turning black, maybe just some. So I think you're doing the right thing, that, you know, a leaf turning black like that or dying, definitely pulled it off. Tomatoes are really resilient in terms of like they're gonna keep growing leaves and continue to grow throughout the season as long as you have like something there to work with. So hopefully they'll pull through. I would almost guess black leaves makes me think too much water, Trisha, which, like you acknowledged, we had a really wet early spring. And then depending on what you were doing with watering, if you were watering on top of the rain that we had up until like 10 days ago or whenever it kind of stopped raining, definitely they probably got too much water. And then even now I would just kind of watch. It's been drier, but it's so easy to overwater a garden compared to underwater it, especially when things are in the ground, and Trisha's garden was in the ground. I did have a couple, I guess, specific to the picture, Trisha, and I don't want this to sound, because I'm looking at a picture, so I didn't get to like touch and feel your soil, so I don't want to come at you. But your soil maybe didn't look like, I don't want to say it didn't look the healthiest. It was black soil. I saw a lot of rocks, which sometimes, I mean, if it's just naturally occurring soil, you're going to get rocks, that's fine. But it just kind of like had an appearance like I was like, oh yeah, this soil looks like it probably is going to stay wet, like maybe not well draining soil. So if this is, I mean, you could mix in, like you could buy like peat moss or even more of just like a potting soil and mix into the top couple layers of your soil. Again, I don't know if this was soil that you brought into your garden or if you just tilled up ground that was already there. Hard to say without touching it, but that I did look and think, oh, this soil, I could see how that soil wouldn't drain super readily, and in a wet spring like this, those tomato roots don't love, they don't like wet feet. You always is what like the saying always is, so you don't want those roots to sit in too much wet ground. The other thing I was questioning toward the back of your picture, I don't know if there's edging on your garden or if I was seeing like a landscape fabric, which I love landscape fabrics, but this almost looked like a landscape fabric under your soil. So I was curious if you layered something like that, like could water possibly be getting trapped? And maybe I'm seeing that wrong, but just anywhere, if you're feeling like water's hanging on too much in your garden, Trisha, I would either try adding in some new soil on top, just kind of mix something in, or if you're trapping water with some kind of fabric, you're gonna wanna address that. And then hopefully with this kind of change of weather and warm and not such consistent rains, hopefully your tomatoes are turning around. Yeah, you could also try, just like I talked about with the peppers, you could also try giving them some nitrogen fertilizer to try and help them get through this. Especially when it's really wet, that nitrogen gets pulled out of the soil really easily, so plants might need a little extra boost. So all those fertilizers that I recommended to Andy, you could use on yours, on your tomato plants, and probably your whole garden at this point. So yeah. And then, you know, Andy, something else just popped in my head. Epsom salt is supposed to be really good for peppers. I don't think it's gonna address, it probably would help with your plant growth, but I know it's also really good for getting like blossoms and like really high and really good fruit yield later on in the season. So that just popped in my head. So circle back to that. All right, and then our final question for today came from Laura, and Laura says, the bottom leaves of our kale are turning yellow. It's in a container with a drainage hole at the bottom. What might be causing this? And then she said, sorry, I can't send a photo right now. She was away from home, but that's okay. Yeah, so this is really common with kale plants. So a kale plant grows and you get all these multiple leaves, right? And if they're turning yellow, it's just that plant is aborting that leaves. So without seeing like how big or mature your plants are, Laura, I would say one thing you could do is just make sure you're using it, harvesting that kale, you know, and obviously you're growing it, so hopefully you're using it, but just make sure like as you start to see big leaves that you're using them and pulling them off. Even if you don't need them right away, stick them in your fridge or chop them up and freeze them or make some kale chips or something, because that plant is kind of just telling you, hey, I've got all these leaves, I can only support so many, so I'm going to start aborting the bottom ones. I mean, if you miss them and they go yellow, worst case, it's not the end of the world. I wouldn't have any concern that it's like a bigger issue without knowing more, but I would just say that's just a kale living its life. Your kale are going to struggle a little bit through the hottest part of the summer. So again, it's going to be important to keep using it so that the plant knows, hey, I want you to keep going. Otherwise the plant's like, okay, I'm done here. I'm going to abort some of these leaves and I'm going to create seeds. So make sure you're using the kale, keeping it watered when it gets hot. If you mentioned that it's in a container, so you could also give it, if you could give it a little bit of like relief from the hot sun. So it's going to love the morning sun, the early afternoon, you know, maybe a little bit, but if you could give it a couple hours of afternoon shade as we get into this like peak of July, August, your kale plant might live a little bit longer life too. So yeah, so those were our 4 questions for today, guys. I hope you learned something. I hope those answers were helpful to the people who submitted them and to others who listen. The form is going to be kept live all the time, so please submit questions. I would aim to do this like once a week, if obviously as long as I keep getting questions submitted. So save the form somewhere, bookmark it or something like that, share it with people. I will I think what I'll do is create a page on my actual website, so it will always be in one place that people can go to for the link. Obviously it's on Facebook, but I would have to continue like reposting it for it to be on top, of course. So yeah, and I would love to keep doing this. Let me know if this like format made sense, if it worked, if you want something different. I'm open to some mild suggestions. But yeah, thanks guys so much. Have a great weekend.